about rehabilitation as well. We believe that by their policy, it only increases the healthcare burden as well. How rehabilitation is something that is costly and will now be only increased under their side, under the victims of production. Last substantive for you today on degradation of law enforcement. We think by their proposal, lobbyists of countries of production, will, like, for example, France or Germany, will only push for policies to push for the state to be a state country of production. We believe this strips the state's judiciary power in order to persecute these people per se, and you need to understand that the law is a reflection of societal will. Law is there to protect the victims of this drug production, and you don't get that under their side when you're only targeting selective people. This disproportional retribution needs to be addressed. Mr. Speaker, for all those reasons, we're proud to oppose.
Member Summer.
Madam Speaker, we must realize that in countries where drug production even exists, we're talking about countries that have weak legal systems, that have weak law enforcement. All of them are permeated by the drug cartel's influence. Shall that be the case, then we think it's much better idea on all levels of cracking down on drug trafficking to do it in countries where this infrastructure does not necessarily exist, right? We agree that shitty countries will still traffic to shitty countries, but then their proposal doesn't solve that either. And in addition, opening opposition basically have conceded that we'll be talking about interactions between countries with shitty law enforcement and countries with stringent laws on drug trafficking because of the point of how we too strongly condemn them. So this is the real context of today's debate. I have mainly three issues I want to talk about in extensions will also be integrated. First is essentially this idea about how we decrease drug consumption and decrease drug production. The second is how we deter drug traffickers. The third is how, well, essentially these two issues, sorry. The first, opening opposition seems to have the misconception that we're letting the drug traffickers go free. Now, as for my understanding of opening government's model, as DPM has stated again, these are two different crimes, right? We're still going to punish them in those home countries. Like if you're going to move into Colombia with tanks, we still stand for that, right? So we still do the same thing. So essentially, what she's saying, that drug production has societal externalities, that is true, and we should also punish them according to the laws that are in those countries, right? There, we think that the DLO's case is essentially quite dead. So the other thing that she said is essentially that it's better for we to prosecute them in countries of production because of several reasons. First of all, because of no evidence. The fact that she mentioned Interpol is a very good thing, because these are international organizations that are good for referring evidence from one country to the other, right? If it's necessary, we request for these sorts of information through the exact infrastructure that she has been talking about. Exactly in the case of, say, for example, transnational corruption or transnational smuggling, do we see the Interpol referring evidence from one country to the other, aiding the determination of guilt? That is how the model simply would stand, and this is how the international infrastructure kills their case. The third thing she wants to talk about is essentially how this would sort of protect, right? What our extension comes in is this. We recognize that these are global organizations, drug cartels in these countries. But we do draw a differentiation. It's between their home country and between the host countries, the different countries, the countries of consumption. We believe that in countries of origin, they have much better, much larger power. In terms of what? In terms of, say, Colombia, when you can assassinate judges that can convict you, or assassinate jury members that trial people of murder. In terms of bribing the police, in terms of permeating through prisons and organizing prison gangs. All those things means that the law enforcement are incredibly weak. Therefore, the drug trafficking network in these countries are incredibly entrenched. Versus the ones in the US, where the distance in terms of geography, in terms of political, in terms of judiciary is much, much lesser. We think the ability to crack down not just on that one single drug trafficker, but on the network of people who has to socialize, who has to communicate with him to facilitate that deal. We see in this policy remove networks and networks, not people and people in countries where we are able to do so. Yes?
We agree that to some extent that these countries face difficulties in their justice system. Can you give us a horizon of which, when are you going to grant some degree of confidence to these justice systems to allow them to recover or have any sort of strength over drug cartels?
Well, so first of all, principally speaking, as the opening government has already said, right, the harm is mainly incurred in the consuming countries. So therefore, the principal justification has to be established before you even establish that these crimes have to be tried in these countries anyway, not just for a crime of vote of confidence. We don't think that's a good platform. Secondly, we think that, oh come on, like yes, there is an improvement, but we're talking about pressing now. We're also talking about rooting out networks in these countries. All of them are guilty, and we think our model is much more effective. So moving on to the second issue of today. So we're talking about what are these drug traffickers? These drug traffickers, as they characterize it, are mostly, for example, like young people don't know what they're doing. Right? First of all, we don't think that's necessarily the case. You need, for example, experienced drug traffickers because you need to bypass customs, you need to get local contacts, all of these things, right? Which means you are all very likely to see repeated drug trafficking, say for example along the US-Mexico border, or say for example highly skilled drug traffickers driving submarines from Colombia to Florida, right? That is what is happening in real life. So first of all, these aren't kids like me, basically. Secondly, we think that, okay, in addition to that, that it is about how they perceive deterrence as a matter. First of all, they want them to have a fair trial. A fair trial is highly suspect in their case, right? First of all, these judicial systems are corrupted, and these drug cartels do have an incentive to crack down on judicial punishment of their henchmen, simply because, first, they are valuable members, they are experienced, and there's a cost in allowing them to crack down because it would sort of empower, influence, all those things would be compromised. So essentially, you don't get fair trials in these countries. Secondly, fair trials have to balance to the harm, right? The harm is in another country, we don't think a fair trial can occur or a fair sentence can be given. So essentially, what our second extension moves in is this, is how you perceive the probability of you getting caught and you getting convicted is the major calculus of how you decide to traffic drugs or not, how you decide to get into business or not. How do you perceive this? Do you perceive it as a home country when every single person that talks to you about drugs say, it's fine, we've got everything settled from the police to the judiciary, or in the other country where information is much more murky, where the only thing you probably know is that these laws are incredibly stringent and they have crackdowns and media attention on all these crackdowns. But the perception of safety, the perception of security, the deterrence effect is enormously bigger in these countries where we trial them by consumption simply by that fact, the perception of threat. So we see that essentially these people will be more deterred in our country. The final thing I want to talk about is essentially how prisons are also being permeated by these drug cartels. Essentially, even if you sentence them to prisons, they organize themselves into prison gangs and go out in 2 months. We don't think that's a fair punishment, we don't think it's effective in any way, we don't think it's effective deterrence. On all grounds, closing government takes today.
Thank you. Member opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, in this debate, we need to reorientate our priorities. In the instance where two countries, the country of production and country of consumption, have a parity of strength in terms of the establishment of the rule of law, ladies and gentlemen, we would be okay with maybe letting the country that are victims to have their own justice system. But with every decision in this context, for you to outsource your justice system to the country of consumption, with every decision that you make that way, ladies and gentlemen, you are weakening the precursor of all the problems of this debate, ladies and gentlemen. You are weakening the justice systems of the very countries where drug cartels run rife, run rampant and flout the law. We think that you need to allow for drug countries of production to have some degree of confidence in terms of enforcement of law in order for you to eradicate the problem at its root. We think that opening a government doesn't do that in this debate. We're going to bring you 2 points in extension in this debate, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I'll tell you how prosecuting these drug traffickers in countries of production cripples drug trafficking networks and limits their operations in connections with drug cartels. But secondly, we'll also tell you how the creation of confidence in the justice system only occurs when you allow the victims of circumstance in this instance to say that they are willing to cooperate with the justice system, and why even in the victims of villages in their favelas in Colombia, ladies and gentlemen, are only willing to cooperate with the justice system when they have the imagery that the justice system is able to stand up to the law and their neighbors are not disappearing by night because they are traveling to Malaysia to smuggle cocaine, ladies and gentlemen. But before I go on to that, let's engage some points in rebuttal. Most of my rebuttal will be integrated in my substantive material. But firstly, let's first point out that much of the principal clash from opening government fell through in this debate because they were unable to defeat the POI from Shafiq, but also much of the analysis that came from opening opposition that drug trafficking is usually ubiquitous in terms of whether or not countries think it's wrong, ladies and gentlemen. That means most countries are very much willing to punish drug traffickers and say there's principally willing to be punished. That means that even though we don't punish them in the country of consumption, woe be to the victims of these people who consume drugs, but these individuals still get justice because in the country of production, these individuals still get justice and can still tell them about it later on, ladies and gentlemen. We think that that's principally moved under that side of the house. But the second concern that came from closing government was in concerns of corruption, ladies and gentlemen. And we think that, true, we concede to some extent that these countries may have problems in terms of dealing with drug cartels because they may have some degree of influence. But let's look at how much really does it happen. And let's look at a case example of Latin America, ladies and gentlemen. That most of the corruption oftentimes happen in a lower rank and file. That most of the time, DEA agents or police officers may get some degree of bribes in that instance. The instance of judges getting assassinated was a one-time ordeal when it was close to the election of a Colombian president. In that instance, ladies and gentlemen, most of the time, drug cartels are reluctant in intervening in the law because oftentimes in Latin American countries, they're very strong figures in terms of how they gain office, ladies and gentlemen. Most politicians gain office on a campaign or being tough on crime, but especially tough on drugs. Especially when you have cooperation with states like United States of America. We have Plan Colombia, which inject millions of dollars in terms of helping countries stand up to drug cartels. We think most of the time, drug cartels have corrupted the government to some extent, but definitely not to the extent where the justice system cannot progress further. But conversely, ladies and gentlemen, what I pointed out in my POI, though that those countries may be corrupted, ladies and gentlemen, but the opportunity cost of you saying that that country will never be able to handle its own cases of drug cartels or drug traffickers and stopping it at its root is an opportunity cost of weakening the justice system even more. We think that's very important. Lastly, this flippant idea at the very dying minutes of closing government speech regarding prison gangs. We don't necessarily think that the idea of prison gangs of people ganging up in prisons, ladies and gentlemen, really affects the rule of law in any sense of the word, ladies and gentlemen. But moving on to my extent, but before that, yes.
So if we have limited resources, limited prosecution, limited investigation, even to fight the production networks, why is it better to outsource consumption and have less burden on ourselves?
Ladies and gentlemen, we agree to some extent there is a limitation on our drug enforcement agencies, but we'll tell you why it empowers the drug enforcement agencies under our side. Firstly, why does it limit the operations of drug cartels in the instance where we prosecute them in country production, ladies and gentlemen? Because most of the time, the way that you limit the ability for drug cartels to have the confidence to operate in countries like Venezuela or Colombia, ladies and gentlemen, is that you have the threat of plea bargaining hanging over the heads of these drug cartels, ladies and gentlemen. Oftentimes, drug cartels are free because drug trafficking route networks are very close to home when you prosecute them in the country of origin. Why is it that this benefit doesn't occur under that side of the house? That you won't get information from victims of circumstance under the side of the government, ladies and gentlemen. Because number one, the information garnered in countries of consumption is oftentimes lost in translation or not cooperated or translated to the country where these drug cartels are rife and rampant, ladies and gentlemen. They tell us that Interpol can act as the intermediary between these countries. But oftentimes, local drug enforcement agencies are very reluctant in handing over their jurisdiction to international bodies like the Interpol or sharing their information with foreign bodies in any instance whatsoever, ladies and gentlemen. So in that instance, that information is permanently lost under the side of government. Secondly, you use the opportunity of having any incentive whatsoever to collect information. Because most of the time, ladies and gentlemen, countries of consumption have a heavy focus on the prejudice as well as the punishment of the drug traffickers, but very little focus on what's the larger picture of crippling the drug cartels, which are the precursor of deleting these drug traffickers. That means there is no focus on collecting that information even at the first level, ladies and gentlemen. That means that there is an opportunity cost of the information that you may garner that can hang over the heads of drug cartels in terms of plea bargaining, or even if you don't get information, ladies and gentlemen, at the very least the imagery and the threat of it being close to home is an imagery that there's a threat to drug cartels and limits the operations to a significant degree. That operation only can happen under the side of opposition. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, we think it creates confidence in the justice system under our side. Why so? When you look at individuals in the favelas, ladies and gentlemen, that work as drug workers, as opening opposition into that, we think that these individuals are only willing to operate and cooperate with the law enforcement agencies if only they see that law enforcement agency provide them some imagery of confidence that they can connect with them, ladies and gentlemen. These drug cartels have gripped villages and told them that drug enforcement agencies will never save them ever, ladies and gentlemen. But if for every single day you see a fellow member of society disappearing because they go up to another country, ladies and gentlemen, you lose more and more confidence in that particular society. But when you tell individual society that you are prosecuted and it is glaring imagery in your country, ladies and gentlemen, that gives a greater opportunity for people in the favelas to think that maybe I can work with the DEA agents in my next door neighbor, ladies and gentlemen, in order to take down the favela that are oppressing my village, ladies and gentlemen. This shows you that outsourcing that particular confidence cripples the local justice system and cripples your ability to delete the precursor of all the problems that happen in this debate, ladies and gentlemen. You need to create a signaling effect to society that the precursor is no longer acceptable and the problems that plague society is one that can be dealt in its origin, ladies and gentlemen. We are very proud to oppose.
Ladies and gentlemen, in my speech today, I'm going to deal with the various layers of mischaracterizations and misconceptions presented by both benches of the opposition. And then I'm going to tell you two questions. Where exactly will justice be done? And we'll talk about the characterization of who exactly is doing these drug trafficking and how do we best deal with the problem of drug trafficking. So first issue, where will justice be done? Now the opposition has repeatedly told us that we want fair trials, and apparently it's not happening in countries of consumption because of prejudices or certain deficiencies in the system. Now closing opposition has then told us, well, the situation in these countries of production are not that bad after all. You should give them some kind of beacon of hope so that they can miraculously develop their legal system. We do not believe that this policy is the right way to be a champion for the legal system. We believe, as I'm going to tell you, that because of the structural deficiencies and because of the nature of drug cartels, there's no way you can use drug trafficking as a way to show that, oh, your legal system is actually okay too, and we should have faith in your law enforcement. Okay, let's look at what has actually happened. In opening half, we have a very kind of skewed perception of international law. First of all, they told us, oh, we actually have, uniform laws all over the world, so therefore any kind of, drug trafficking will be dealt with the same way in the country of production compared with the country of consumption. We say this is not the case, right? They told us, oh, just because you have the UN Convention on Narcotics, this will ensure uniform laws. Now, international law only provides that you need a certain legal framework to be put in place. That's the only thing that they do. They do not specify or dictate to you what laws you should put in place, what should be a crime, what should be not, the degree of legal sanction you place on it, and what kind of sanctions and penalties you do, right? These are things that are left to autonomy and sovereignty of individual nation states. So we do not see how you can simply say, oh, just because we all agree that drug trafficking is bad, therefore they will all be treated the same way in different countries. Like, this is not the case. Then it goes, oh, actually we also have extradition agreements in all countries, but we say, okay, Snowden wasn't shipped back to the US for a certain reason, right? And in the first place, it may not even be a crime in the country of production, as we told you in our speeches. So, okay, let's sort of close it then. I think trying to paint a picture of how corruption is not really, that entrenched in the system in places like Colombia and Mexico. They try to tell us that, you don't want to, step on the police's toes. Now, let's look at the idea of corruption, first of all. They say, that, oh, because of these like huge political support for crackdown on drugs, then, the drug cartels will be reluctant to do anything crazy. Now, we point out that this is impossible. Without any kind of higher level support for this kind of systematic corruption, intimidation tactics, it will be impossible for you to establish such a stronghold on the system by these drug cartels. They even conceded that yes, drug cartels may be a problem, but because we feel that the political wills means that you're going to crack down on it, we say that's not true. We say all of the mayors, all of these top level officials, they are complicit in helping and aiding these people. If any kind of crackdown they talk about is merely talking about wars between different drug lords, and the mayor happens to crack down on the one that their friend is also not supportive of. So we see this thing does not happen at all. But before that,
how will countries gain warrants to investigate drug-related crimes if host nations refuse to convict traffickers?
okay, this brings me to my second issue of being lost in translation and how the local police won't help. Okay, like Jeff told you, Interpol exists for a reason, right? We believe that different countries and the police force and law enforcement do have the incentive to cooperate to crack down on things like drug trafficking, like smuggling, and all these things that have trans-border nature of the crimes, right? They said, okay, we don't want to share info because, we will be seen as, like, we will lose the jurisdiction. Well, they were the ones who told us, oh, actually, these countries have an incentive to solve the drug problem too, right? If that is the case, you can have your cake and eat it too. Do they or do they not want to solve the drug problem? If you feel that is the case, then naturally there will be pressure on law enforcement to show certain results, right? In that case, we do not believe your case will stand. We told you how Interpol does collect evidence. You don't have any problem of saying, oh, we don't know that this guy was actually from a very poor family and he had this extenuating circumstances. We do not believe that is going to be the case. No, thank you. So let's look at what we have told you. We've told you that basically drug cartels, given their incentive to have entrenched power and entrenched stronghold over the country of production, they want to, monopolize, their power in that region, right? And then they further expand their power by shipping everything overseas. So we do believe that they do have this incentive to corrupt the villages, to corrupt these top-level officials in order to, garner support to expand their empire. So we do not see, in fact, how justice will be done in a situation where we told you that law enforcement is weak, all this kind of, just corruption, this legal, just the weak concept of, the legal system. So we don't see how any kind of confidence can be inspired when you see these things happening right under your noses, and on the one hand you're saying, oh, we believe in drug crackdowns. That is not anything that's going to inspire faith in citizens when they see the legal system is operating in that manner. So let's look at the second issue of who exactly are these drug traffickers we're talking about, right? Opening opposition trying to characterize them as, poor exploited drug mules who are, just completely ignorant. They just did it for a few, for their livelihood, just for a few $1,000s. Now, we say no, that is not the case. Jeff has already told you that we're talking about experienced drug traffickers who do this on a regular basis and who have been specially trained and who have connections on the ground, right? So before I even arrive at the border, I already know I have my connections, I have my contacts, I know exactly how I'm going to ship this thing inside, right? And we believe that this is something they have failed to deal with. Our problem on government bench that we're trying to solve today is that these drug traffickers are not brought to justice in their countries of production. They have refused to engage with us on the idea that, they've been telling us that, closing us towards, okay, the country of production still criminalizes this drug trafficking action. We say that's not premised on the particular principle of harm that we've been trying to tell you about. When we're talking about the harm that's inflicted on the countries of consumption, which is where the drug problem lies, then we say that any kind of action on a country of production is not going to be able to have this message of, okay, we exert sanctions because we believe that you're inflicting harm. Right? That does not necessarily ring true in the country of production. So we've told you how these drug traffickers are not these people that you should be, you should mischaracterize as being these, ignorant youngsters. But we've also told you how necessarily, in order to break down the network, in order to break down the entrenched network of drug cartels, you do have to hit it where we can actually catch the people. Right?
Yeah.
We do not want corruption and intimidating tactics in the countries of production to be able to overwhelm the legal enforcement that we're trying to achieve. And that is why we're very proud of those.
Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be covering 4 areas of what has happened in this debate. Firstly, I'm going to talk about victims' justice and who ensures victims' justice under this topic. Secondly, what solves the root problem of drug production, and we're going to show you that opposition solves it better. Thirdly, we're going to talk about the structures of judiciary and which structures of judiciary is better. And lastly, very quickly, deterrence. But first, let's look at victims' justice. We think, ladies and gentlemen, that there are victims of circumstance in both countries, i.e. the consumers in countries of consumption, also they are consumers in countries of production because they still produce and distribute these drugs in countries of production as well. So there are victims on both ends of these countries, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, we think if you have the trial in either country, there will be victims' justice. But ladies and gentlemen, we think that it is more important to cater justice to the people that were coerced into this drug trade, i.e. children that were kidnapped since they were young and coerced into helping these drug cartels for production. Farmers that are coerced into running poppy farms, ladies and gentlemen, that have no escape because they fear that their families and their friends might be murdered if they run away, ladies and gentlemen. Drug cartels like Los Zetas, for example, have huge influence on they control villages, ladies and gentlemen, and they threaten these individuals, ladies and gentlemen, and these people are shackled and can't escape. The reason for this is that there is an illusion that the drug cartels are invincible, that they cannot be taken down, that they are the providers, ladies and gentlemen. And we think that if we have trials and convictions in countries of production, there will be the imagery that these people are not actually invincible, that these people can be taken down, that our justice system can be trusted, ladies and gentlemen, in order to take down these people. That creates a resurgence of hope on the part of these farmers and victims, ladies and gentlemen, to come out and report and cooperate with the police. That was something exclusive that came from Mifzal that we didn't get response from that side. So we think that is how it will ensure that better cooperation between these individuals happen. Sit down. Secondly, what solves the root problem? We already told you from opening and closing, ladies and gentlemen, that it is better and more comprehensive due process if you have it in countries of production. Why is this so? Opening told you that you have proximity with witnesses, you have proximity with accomplices, ladies and gentlemen, and there could be better information gathering. Closing told you that you have the opportunity in order to do things like plea bargaining, in order to put them back into the drug cartels to act as double agents to provide information, ladies and gentlemen. Information gathering is more centralized because now there's one law enforcement agency that is controlling the information that can piece the puzzles together and capture these people. What happens under their side? You have law enforcement agencies from different countries, ladies and gentlemen, and there's no centralized form of information. And we think because law enforcement agencies are often unwilling to share information because they don't don't want to seem weak, ladies and gentlemen, and lose jurisdiction, most often than not, this information get lost in translation. And that is problematic because we need those information in order to solve the root causes of this problem. We don't see how they help in terms of this issue, ladies and gentlemen. But furthermore, we think that it is important to ensure natural justice for the drug trafficker as well. Because when you are tried in a country of consumption, where the laws are different, where you don't have access to counsel, for example, ladies and gentlemen, when people are vindictive, ladies and gentlemen, or it's more difficult for you to get a lawyer, we think it is harmful for these people. Before I move on to the third issue, I'll take one from opening.
In a world where you cannot even resort to the law enforcement but are coerced to do trafficking of drugs, how can you believe in that legal justice?
That's why, ladies and gentlemen, there needs to be an imagery that the legal system is prosecuting these people to give courage to the people to come out. They were not sensitive towards this argument that came out from Mirza. Now let's look at structures of judiciary. We think that the premise on government side is assertive, i.e. the premise that they set up in this debate is that they assume that all countries of production has weak judicial system and all countries of consumption have strong judicial system. If you look at the nature of like Southeast Asian countries where the drugs mainly come from the Golden Triangle in the north and supplied in countries like Malaysia, Indonesia or Philippines, ladies and gentlemen, we think the judicial system of these countries are relatively the same. And we think it is presumptuous for that side of the house to say that countries of production often have weaker judicial system, ladies and gentlemen. In order for this debate to occur, we have to assume some parity in the judicial system and argue the merits and demerits of having the trials in either country, ladies and gentlemen. Secondly, they argued on corruption. Like developing countries are corrupted, it's easy